The Islamic Horoscope. Welcome. Medieval Islamic astrology and astronomy continued from the Hellenistic and Roman traditions based on Ptolemy's Almagest. Centres of learning in medicine, astronomy, astrology were set up in Baghdad and Damascus, and particularly in Baghdad under Caliph Al-Mansur established a major observatory and library in the city, making it the world's astronomical centre. During this time, the knowledge of astronomy greatly increased, with the astrolabe being invented by Al-Fazari. Many modern star names actually are derived from their Arabic and Persian names. Nevertheless, astrology is somewhat controversial within modern Islam. It was much less so in medieval times, and often there's little distinction between astronomy, used to calculate prayer times and the timing of Ramadan, and astrology. But astrology also became associated with the occult and wider sorcery. So, for example, Ghāyat al-Ḥakīm, the Picatrix as it's known in the West, is a grimoire based on Islamic celestial magic. Now, this vlog is about Arabic, the Islamic horoscope, but there is a Javanese horoscope, which my wife seems to understand. I must question her more about it and issue a vlog on that if I can understand enough from her. But as I say, this is about Arabic, Islamic horoscope. The astrologers. Al-Kindi took his view of the solar system from Ptolemy, who placed the Earth at the centre of a series of concentric spheres, which are known as heavenly bodies. These are the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter and the stars. He claims that these bodies are rational entities whose circular motion is in the obedience to and worship of God. Their role is to act as instruments for divine providence. The evidence for this being that the different seasons are marked by particular arrangements of the planets and stars, most notably the sun. So people born under at a particular time in a particular place are viewed in accordance to these heavenly bodies above where they were born. Al-Kindi established the concept of heavenly bodies emitting what he calls stellar rays. He claims that everything in the world is infinitely connected, including the heavens, which influence the world via these rays. So it's not that far off my view of consciousness. These not only explain divination using astrology, but magic or sorcery, as magic harnesses these rays. And now, as I say, it may seem strange, but many of us talk in terms of energy. I mean, I use the word consciousness, but I do use the word energy from time to time. Prayers create rays and therefore can produce results, whilst Al-Kindi believed that animal sacrifices produce an explosion of rays. But these are tools which produce results only because Allah created them. Abu Munia or Abu Mashra, 1805 to 1855, was one of the most influential of the Islamic astrologers. His treatise Introductorium in Abstorium, Kitab al-Muktab al-Kabir, spoke of how only observing the greatest diversity of planetary movements can we comprehend the unnumbered varieties of changes within this world. Indeed, he sees astrology as complementing medicine. The Introductorium was one of the first books to find its way in translation through Spain and into Europe during the Middle Ages, and was highly influential in the revival of astrology and astronomy in Europe. Persians also combined the disciplines of medicine and astrology by linking the curative properties of herbs with specific zodiac signs and planets. Mars, for instance, was considered both hot and dry, and so ruled plans with a hot, pungent taste, like hellebore, tobacco or mustard. These beliefs were adopted by European herbalists like Culpeper, right up until the development of modern European medicine. The Persians also developed a system by which the difference between the ascendant of each planet of the zodiac was calculated. This new position then became a part of some kind. For example, a part of fortune is found by taking the difference between the sun and the ascendant sign and adding it to the moon. If this part is thus calculated, it was in the 10th house of Libra. For instance, it suggested that money could be made from some kind of partnership. The calendar introduced by Omar Khayyam Neshaburi, based on the classical zodiac, remains in effect in Afghanistan and Iran as the official Persian calendar. The Alchemist, together with the original contributions of the 9th and 10th century Persian astronomy, such as the astrolabe, was introduced to Christian Europe in the beginning of the 11th century through contact with Islamic Spain. Another notable Persian astrologer was Qutb al-Din al-Shirazi, born in Shiraz in Iran and lived from 1236 to 1311. He wrote critiques of Ptolemy's Almagest and produced two very prominent works on astronomy: The Limits of Accomplishment Concerning Knowledge of the Heavens in 1281 and The Royal and Present in 1284, both of which commented and improved on Ptolemy's work, particularly in the field of planetary motion. Al-Shirazi was the first person to give the correct scientific explanation for the formation of the rainbow. Ulugh Beg was a 5th century Timurid sultan, but also a mathematician and astronomer. He built an observatory in 1428 and produced the first original star maps since Ptolemy, which correlated the positions of many stars and included many new ones. Al-Biruni produced a major work on astrology, and his primary and astronomical and mathematical text. In these early chapters, he lays the foundation for the final chapter on astrological prognostication, which he criticises. He was the first to make the semantic division between astronomy and astrology, and in later works he wrote a reflection on astrology in contradiction to the legitimate science of astronomy, for which he expresses his wholehearted support. Despite this, his condemnation of astrology, he provides a valuable insight into Islamic divination. And this sort of condemnation was a very common method for imparting knowledge which was considered maybe somewhat dangerous during that age, both in Islam and in Christianity. So, as I've indicated, the Islamic astrology corresponds to the astrology that we use today. So Aries is known as Al-Hamal, and this marks the beginning of the calendar with spring. Al-Biruni describes those born under Aries to be thin, with medium height, tend to have poor eyesight, with their eyes being dark or grey in colour. They're described to have large noses and ears, while their hair is curly and a reddish colour. They have a youthful disposition, a sharp tongue, to support their tendency to be talkative. They're impulsive and often described as quick to anger. Though they're generous and friendly, they can also be haughty and demanding. They're eager for relationships as they fear abandonment. However, they have few children, even though they're one of the lusty signs. Aries are designated to the head and the face, and are thus born under Aries will have marks on their face or hands. Regions are also designated to the signs. So Aries is said to govern Babylon, Palestine, Persia and Azerbaijan. Aries also corresponds to fire, iron, copper, lead, crowns, helmets and girdles. They also correspond to all hooved animals such as goats, sheep, ram and deer. Taurus, or Athawa. Taurus are tall and broad, have a strong neck and prominent eyebrows, forehead and an upturned nose. They have dark hair and downcast eyes with a large mouth and thick lips. They're described as feminine and melancholic. Those born under this sign are said to have good judgment. Although they're one of the lustful signs, like Aries, they often favour small families, which could be due to their reserved nature, and also how the first part of the Taurus indicates sterility. Taurus are in charge of the neck, windpipe and throat. Taurus corresponds to, amongst others, Oman, Cyprus and parts of Iran. Taurus is also linked to childhood and spring. They're associated with large domesticated animals such as cows, calves, elephants and gazelles. Taurus also corresponds to unirrigated fields. Gemini, or Al-Jawaz. Al-Biruni describes those born under Gemini to have overall good appearance and are very sharp. Thus they excel in games. They're described to be medium in height, have a fine face, and for males, a fine beard. They have broad shoulders and long legs. They're described to be masculine, airy, and spring. Although twins are prevalent in Gemini, they usually have few or no children or are barren. The arms, hands, and shoulders correspond to Gemini. Ibn Ezra gives a good example of how medical astrologers would refer to astrology when giving treatments. According to Ibn Ezra, it is not auspicious to do bloodletting when the moon is in Gemini, as the moon governs the tides, blood flow, while Gemini governs the arms. Gemini corresponds to the regions of Egypt and Armenia. Gemini also is associated with gentle winds, animal spirits, drums, lutes, flutes. They're also associated with winged animals, and over time gazelles and horned vipers. Cancer, or Asataran. Cancer are fickle, emotional and prone to inactivity. They're described as being moderate in height and have thick limbs and with long legs. They have long hair and fine brown eyes with a crooked nose and teeth. They often appear to be downcast. The season that corresponds to Cancer is spring to summer and is described as being feminine, nocturnal and watery. Cancer often favours large families and would have many children. Cancer corresponds to the stomach, spleen and lungs. Cancer also corresponds to rivers, Sudan, China and places of worship. They also correspond to medium to tall trees, running water, rain, rice and cane sugar. They're associated with reptiles and also aquatic and terrestrial animals that are prevalent in the desert, such as beetles and lizards. Leo, Al-Assad. Al-Biruni describes those born under Leo to be good-looking and tall. They have a broad face, thick fingers, slender thighs and hips, a large nose and a wide mouth with gapped teeth. They are further described to be regal and bold, albeit for the fact that they can be troublesome and have a hard time accepting the truth. They're very persuasive, and although are often described as being courageous, they tend to be afraid of the unseen. They're described as being masculine, hot and fiery. Their season is therefore the summer. Although Leo is one of the lustful signs, they have few to no children, and maybe this is an indication of sterility. Leo corresponds to the heart. It's said that in their youth, Leos would suffer lovesickness. It's understood that this is meant that their emotional path would be such that they would manifest into some form of physical illness. Leo corresponds to the region of Jerusalem. Leo is associated with tall trees, subterranean fire minerals extracted from the ground, tall metal vessels, and objects made from rubies, emeralds, golds, and silver. Leo also corresponds to black snakes, wild horses, tame lions, and all other animals that have claws. Virgo, al-Adara. Virgo are stout, although leaning towards tall in structure, broad shoulders and chests, and have a flat nose. They also have marks on their chests and abdomen that may come in the form of moles. Further descriptions about Virgo tend to contradict each other, as although they are very pleasant, they're also highly anxious about the future, and even though they are playful, they're also restrained. Furthermore, although Virgo may tend to be judgmental, they're nonetheless truthful. They're described as being feminine, earthy, and melancholic. They're one of the nocturnal signs, similar to Libra, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Gemini. Virgo indicates sterility, with having little to no children, and is often dubbed as the mistress of these three forms. Out of all the signs, Virgo is the most virtuous, and they often have a good suspicion of trouble. Virgo corresponds to the stomach and the belly. One superstition as to why Virgo may have a mark on their abdomen. Virgo corresponds to the region of Andalusia, Syria, and Crete. Virgo is associated with sown fields, all running water, mercury, and berries. Virgo also corresponds to magpies, black crows, sparrows, parrots, and large serpents. Libra, al-Mizan. Al-Biruni describes those born under Libra as being good-looking, with a good nose and feet, have distinctive marks on either their waist or neck. They're said to have a good heart, be generous and playful. Although they are quick-minded, they can also be indecisive and are better at giving than listening to advice. Libra can take pleasure in the smallest things and love to surround themselves with beauty. They're described as being masculine, airy, hot and sanguine, with their season being the autumn. Even with its strong ties to Venus, Libra is the pinnacle of justice and has strong ties to war, making it highly sought after by Muslim rulers. Libra corresponds to the hips, back and buttocks. Libra corresponds to the regions of Mecca, Kabul, Herat, Greek, small mosques, and most importantly Rome. It is said that Rome was founded when the moon was in Libra. Libra also corresponds to date palm trees, tall trees, and grown on mountain tops, and fruits that decorate trees. They also denote a dark atmosphere and corresponds to silks, lutes and drums. Libra is associated with birds, leopards, as well as with jinn. Scorpio, al-Akrab. Scorpio are good looking with a round face, broad shoulders and chest, alluring eyes, narrow forehead, coarse hair and slender thighs. They would often have a mark on their foot or back and have deep lines on the soles of their feet. They're interested in occult and are eager to engage in conversations. Al-Biruni further describes those born under Scorpio as often concealing their deep anxiety, even though they have a bold and impulsive nature. He continues to say that Scorpios have a mind for vengeance and have a hard time forgiving, often thinking about their enemies, of things that are sexual in nature. They're described as being feminine, watery and nocturnal, with their corresponding season being autumn. Although Scorpio is another lusty sign, its lust differs from Taurus's lust, which are acceptable within the confines of propriety. Scorpio's lustful tendency is often described as being lecherous. This does not mean they're unfaithful. Scorpios also tend to have big families and many children. Scorpio therefore corresponds to the genitals. Scorpio corresponds to the regions of the deserts of Arabia, Yemen, and some areas of Turkey. Scorpio also corresponds to medium-sized trees, running waters such as rivers, as well as things being mixed with clay-like drowned land. Precious stones that are from water, like corals, are also associated with them. Furthermore, reptiles, aquatic animals, poisonous insects, and many-footed animals, like the scorpion and wasps, also correspond to Scorpio. Sagittarius, al-Quaz. Al-Biruni describes those born under Sagittarius to be tall, to have a good-looking backside. They have a reddish complexion with nice eye shape, large belly, coarse nose and a long beard. They would also have some kind of mark on their arms and legs. They're described to have a noble spirit. Like Leo, they're considered to be one of the royal signs and are very skilled in communication, often influencing people in their writing and their speech. Although they're open-minded and liberal, they have very strong dislikes. Furthermore, although it's often well-intentioned, their tendency to meddle may cause problems. Sagittarius is described as being masculine, fiery and dry. Their season is the autumn. Even though they're one of the lusty signs, they favour small families and would have few children. Sagittarius corresponds to the thighs. It also corresponds to the regions of Persia, Baghdad and Iraq. Sagittarius is associated with natural streams and the body heat of animals. Tin, gold and articles for fighting like spears and arrows are associated with them. Furthermore, hooved animals such as horses, donkeys and mules are associated with Sagittarius, although there is some indication that birds and reptile may also be associated with them. Capricorn, al-Jadi. Capricorn have a slender body with a fine figure, have thin hair and legs. They're social, amicable, forthright. However, they're rather shy, cautious and solitary. Al-Biruni further describes them as often taking a pragmatic approach to things and tend to get anxious about life. They're often described as being pessimistic with many opinions and have a good memory of things that slighted them. They're described as being feminine, nocturnal and melancholic. Their season is spring. The latter part of Capricorn are eager for marriage and favour large families, thus having many children. However, the first part of their lives of Capricorn indicates sterility and thus would have few children. Like Scorpio, their lusty aspect is seen as being lecherous. Capricorn corresponds to the knees, and those born under Capricorn often have a mark on their knees. Capricorn corresponds to the regions of the Indus River, eastern China and the Persepolis. Capricorns are associated with herbs and crops. They also correspond to children, herded animals such as lambs, as well as creeping things like locusts. Aquarius, Adwal. Al-Biruni describes those born under Aquarius to be good-looking with a broad chest and narrow forehead, well-filled out body, and to have a downcast demeanour. They're easily bored and annoyed and very forthright. They struggle in trying to articulate their emotions, although when it comes to their thoughts and ideas, they're able to express them easily. Al-Biruni criticised them for being an overthinker, and they have a tendency to contemplate on matters too deeply. Aquarius is described as being masculine, hot and moist. Its season is the winter. Aquarius favours smaller families and would thus only have a few children. Aquarius corresponds to shins and ankles, and those born under Aquarius would often have a mark on those parts of their bodies, as well as the head. Aquarius corresponds to the two regions of Egypt and the southern part of Iraq. Aquarius is also associated with tall trees, seas and running water. They're also associated with vultures, eagles, beavers, sables and aquatic birds, especially ones that are black. Pisces, Al-Hut. Pisces are delicate and have a good figure. They have a smooth skin, a fine face, narrow shoulders and forehead, a small head and a medium height. They're described as moody, get attached easily, and although smart, they tend to put little effort into work. They're often time enchanted by locations. They have a tendency to wander. Pisces is described as being lustful, however not in the same lecherous tendency as Scorpio and Taurus. They often change their minds, and Pisces men in particular are known as being unreliable. Pisces are described as being feminine, nocturnal and cold. Their season is the winter and the early days of spring. They favour large families and would have many children. Pisces corresponds to the feet and the heel, and thus those born under Pisces often have injuries to their heels. They also have a mark on their chest. Pisces corresponds to the regions of Syria and the seas of Yemen. Pisces is associated with cotton, sugar, fruit-bearing trees, sandalwood, pearls, corals, stagnant water and lakes, and medium-sized trees. They also correspond to birds, fish, aquatic carnivores, serpents and scorpions. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this vlog and that, not only got something out of it but provoked thoughts. I'm not here to push my beliefs, my thoughts on you, only to open up your own thinking, get you thinking about the world and life. When I started The Real Magic of Java, I believed that I'd only release them every month or maybe every 2 months. But now I find myself adding to this subsection once or twice a week. But please subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications for when I add new parts to this subsection. In part, the reason why I'm doing it more often is that the concept has moved from filming rituals and events that took place in Java to me also describing my beliefs and philosophy. And that does come in response to people expressing an interest in it. But of course, me actually seeing rituals and events really doesn't happen so often. What I would say to you is that there's no attempt at subterfuge on my behalf. And when I do experience rituals, I will include them for you to see. And as I say, there's no way I'm trying to mislead you. And if I believe there is subterfuge, if I uncover it, I will point it out to you. I'm trying to be as honest as I can be. Now, please make comments, please ask questions, and I'll try to be as honest and open with you as I can be. Of course, there will be some of you who disagree with me, particularly when I talk in terms of my own beliefs, my own feelings. And, you're welcome to alternative feelings, and we can agree to disagree. Sometimes I find that people on YouTube can be unnecessarily attacking and aggressive, and at times I don't restrain myself enough, and I apologise, but it's not my intention to put anybody down, I know what I talk about can be emotive, and it can be challenging to your beliefs, but I'd love to enter an open discussion, a heartfelt discussion, but unfortunately, I often come across things that are, especially when people quote the scriptures to me, I've just no idea where it takes us, Because I'm speaking from the heart, sorry, if you want to quote the scriptures at me, do so, but it doesn't have much impact on me, I personally have no desire to impose my feelings on you, and I suppose when people try to do it to me, it washes off, All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to share my feelings with you, and I'd love an open discussion on feelings. I really would love it, and sorry if I don't always react as best I should. I try and cure this in myself, but I think this is part of the sort of narcissism of social media that I talk about so much in this subsection. So look, if you've enjoyed it, I really urge you to listen to other sections on this channel, particularly the 4 audio books that I've uploaded onto this channel. Yes, they are in a novel format, they are novels, but they go into much greater depth than my thoughts and feelings. Now, what I would say to you is these are sequential. So my thoughts and feelings develop as we go through each chapter and each book. So it does begin with 1.1, the Chinese cemetery. But, you know, hey, it's up to you. Feel free to dip in as you wish, as you want. And, you know, really heartfelt thanks for listening to this. And I really want to say a great big thank you, and God bless you.